I'm Rip Esselstyn, and you're listening to the Plant Strong podcast. The food on your plate tells a very important story, and understanding it can be very empowering. In this eye-opening episode, I sit down with Andrea Freeman. She is the author of the James Beard Award-winning book, Ruin Their Crops on the Ground, to uncover exactly how food, race, and class have shaped America and how understanding this history can help us build a fairer, more just food system. This conversation will influence the way you see your food and inspire you to think about the impact that we all can have. We'll meet Andrea right after these words from Plant Strong. January is right around the corner, and we are getting ready to launch something huge, something that's grounded in real food, real movement, and real change. No restrictions, no gimmicks, no wellness theater, just strength you can feel. If you're tired of quick fixes and you're ready to build habits that actually last, stay close. This January, we are kicking off a month-long reset that's built on our 3 pillars of real health, and I want to invite you. It's simple, it's doable, and it's real. More details are coming soon. Be sure to join our Facebook community or visit planstrong.com and subscribe to our emails so you don't miss this epic experience. 2026 is going to be our biggest year yet. And if you've been waiting for the perfect moment to immerse yourself in real food, real learning, and real transformation, this is going to be it. We're hosting 4 signature Plant Strong events in 2026. Our first is our Plant Strong retreat in April. This is 6 unforgettable days in beautiful Black Mountain, North Carolina, where you get to learn, move, eat deliciously insane food, and reconnect with what matters most. Next up, we have Vital Signs 2026 in June. This is our brand new Food is Medicine conference at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. If you want to understand how real food can change lives, this is the place to be. Next up, our 15th annual Plant Stock event in the fall. This is our legendary weekend of inspiration, community, and celebration. Stay tuned for the full lineup. It's going to be something special. And last up, we have our Sedona Fall Retreat. This is a stunning, soul-filling experience in the Red Rocks where deep rest, learning, and real food and nourishment come together in one unforgettable week. Visit our website, liveplantstrong.com, to learn more. We cannot wait. Connect with you in the year ahead. Today, we are going to dive into a topic that's as important as it is eye-opening: how the politics of food have shaped our country and our communities. My guest today is Andrea Freeman. She is the author of the James Beard Award-winning book, Ruin Their Crops on the Ground. Andrea has spent over 20 years researching how food systems have been used as tools of control, and she's here to help us understand the intersections of food, racism, and classism that have existed, well, since our country was first founded. This episode is a deep, fascinating look at history, policy, and the ongoing fight for food justice. And it's also a call for each of us to use the compassion and power that we all have to push for change. Please welcome Andrea Freeman. Andrea Freeman, I want to welcome you to the Plant Strong podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Where am I talking to you from today?
I am in the city of Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
Yes.
Wow. How long you been in LA?
About 2 years now.
Mm.
Yeah. I
Mm.
moved here
Where did you?
from
Yeah.
Hawaii. I was there for 10 years before this.
Yeah. Where in Hawaii?
Oahu.
Uh-huh.
So Honolulu, Kailua, different parts of the island.
Mm. Mm. Well, do you miss it?
Some things about it and others not.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet. I bet. Well, I've been to Hawaii a bunch, and it's great, but I've never lived there for more than I think 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah. It's an absolutely stunning place to visit. And
Yeah.
it's a beautiful and challenging place to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're not here to talk about Hawaii.
No.
We are here to talk about a very important piece of work that you've written. This is it right here. If everybody can see it, it's called "Ruin Their Crops on the Ground: The Politics of Food in the United States, from the Trail of Tears to School Lunch," and it is. It's very upsetting.
Sorry.
I find
Yes.
incredibly upsetting. I mean, I can't. I imagine it was probably. I would imagine difficult to write this book, but at the same time, so important for people to understand what has gone on historically with our food system and how it has kind of created racism and classism, as you talk about. But before we dive in, where were you and what were you doing when you decided that, you know what, this is a book that I want to tackle?
Yeah. So I started thinking about food and racism when I was in law school, and I took a class called The Suburbs, which was cross-listed between law and architecture. And I decided I wanted to write a paper about fast food. And I called that paper Fast Food Oppression Through Poor Nutrition. And that is when the first time I started thinking about the intersections between food and racism. And then I was hooked. And so over the next 20 years, I just explored a lot of different aspects of that. And I was really focused on how corporations and the government partner together to create these, as you said, food systems and conditions where there are really stark health disparities between, racialized groups. And then I started thinking about, well, what's the history of this? And that's where I started going earlier and thinking, even before United States became a country, how food had been used as a tool of oppression and subordination throughout history. And once I had all of that, I said, you know what?
Yeah.
I think this is book material. Like, this is not something I want to keep to law review, journals, and the small sort of legal academic community that I'm part of. This is something that I want to share with the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, it's a very uncomfortable truth that you bring out. And so it's something that I don't see people, swarming to, like, really want to know the history, unfortunately. But I think it is paramount that we understand the history and why we are where we are today. And so I can't even tell you how much I applaud you for, what you've created here and the amount of research that you put into this. Can you, let us know, how much time did you put in researching for this book?
Yes, this is really about 20 years of research. So all the different topics, because you see the range of topics in the book, and some of it reflects that early work that I did. And then I was still working and researching pretty much like to the point where the editor said no more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Well, and when did it officially come out?
That was last summer. So not this, like 2024, July.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful.
Thanks.
Well, what I would like to do, if you'll indulge me, is, I think what to me would make sense can we kind of go through chapter by chapter? We'll start with chapter 1, which is kind of weapons of health destruction.
Yeah.
Not mass destruction, but health destruction, which actually is mass
It is.
destruction, isn't
It's
it?
just a little more subtle than we usually think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's start there. Your subtitle is The Politics of Food in the United States, from the Trail of Tears to School Lunch. And why is it Trail of Tears? I mean, did that happen? Because I don't know. Did that happen before 1779 when Washington basically said ruin their crops on the ground?
Yeah. So it was after, but part of that whole strategy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because that was when Andrew Jackson became president and then started this real exile across the country. So the seeds were planted, if you will, with Washington's order, which is where the title comes from. He said, ruin their crops in the ground and stop them planting more. And so that was to say, the way we're going to steal this land is by making sure that people living there have nothing to eat. So he ordered his troops to destroy all the land, and we have massive killing of buffalo and basically a very focused intent to starve people out.
And did the Native Americans, were they not able to put up a fight? Did they just not have weapons? Did they, I mean...
Oh, there was a lot of fighting. Yeah,
okay.
A lot of fighting and resistance. But at the end of the day, if you have no food, you can't survive, right? And so then there was this push. If you go somewhere else along the Trail of Tears and, walk across the country, there's land there and you'll be able to get food from that land, and also the promise of rations, right? And then these rations given by the United States become highly problematic for centuries, like forever, right? Because they're full of really non-nutritious, often rotten and spoiled food that then are causing death and illness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And also, they start using rations as a kind of political weapon. So it's also, well, if you don't turn your kids over to the federal Indian boarding schools, then your rations are cut off. If you don't have a family system the way we have them, no more rations, right? It's used for everything.
So basically, this was their way of coercing these children to go to these boarding schools, right?
Yeah, at least they would be fed there, but then the food they're fed is not the food that they're used to, and then that causes a whole other thing, because we have this other trend that we still have of trying to Americanize people through food.
Right, and that's a whole nother chapter.
That's true.
Let's
There's overlap.
Right. Now tell me this. So, Washington and Jackson basically ruined their crops on the ground, Trail of Tears. And then so were the Native Americans then basically using buffalo? Were they eating buffalo in order to survive? Because at some point in your book, and I'm getting it kind of the chronologically mixed up, but I know that like General Dodge gave this, basically said, kill every buffalo that you can, because every dead buffalo is an Indian gone. I mean, that just makes my heart just, oh.
Yeah, it's devastating. And it was very devastating for the indigenous communities that relied on buffalo, not just for food, but as culturally, socially, it wasn't just, animals were integrated into the culture and society.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about, I mean, so that was very, 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 very quick, but let's move into now chapter 2, which is survival pending revolution. And here we kind of move on from kind of Native Americans to, I guess you'd call, enslaved people and Black people.
Mhm.
And you basically from slavery to emancipation. So tell me, how were the Black people's diets controlled before and after slavery?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a complex question, of course, and it does have a whole chapter there. But enslavers did very carefully calculate how much food to give enslaved people and varied it according to what work they were doing, what age they were, what gender they were. Um, it was designed to fuel people to work, but to keep them weak so they wouldn't be rebelling, right? Didn't work, of course. But so that would be passed around in pamphlets between enslavers. And of course, they wanted to just use the minimum of their own resources, but still keep people alive, right? But then what we see is once there is emancipation, there was not much thought given into how people would survive once they were freed. So you had a lot of people just not having any resources, not having food. The creation of the Freedmen's Bureau, which did give out some rationing again to people. But then they quickly kind of gave up on that policy. And we see, something that's echoed today, the idea of entitlement and people should just get their own food and, which is not realistic at all. But what ended up happening is when they cut off food from the government, people had to go back into oppressive contracts with the landowners that they had been freed from just to be able to eat, right? And then we see new systems where there's not even this kind of care or thought to how much people need to eat or any nutrition, and a period where, people are working convict leasing, being arrested for fake crimes and then sent to work, but not being given enough food, and a lot of death then too, just from poor nutrition or starvation.
Where were you going to do most of your research? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, I did. A lot of reading, just a lot of books and like oral histories transcribed, articles, just, the nose in the book and the computer. Yeah.
Yeah. How did it make you feel? And how did it like resonate in your soul as what I would imagine is a very empathetic, compassionate human being, just reading and listening to scores of all of this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's devastating, of course. But it's also a lot of the history I was writing is not my history, and I think that I don't know, that's sort of two sides of a coin. Like on the one hand, it's like hard to tell stories that aren't from your own background or descendants, but there's also maybe some distance from it, I don't know. I just feel like it's necessary to bring this up to the surface. And so that's motivating for me. And it's all just so fascinating and something that people don't think about and talk about a lot. And so, I always tell my students, if you're going to write, it has to be something you're really, really passionate about, or you're just not going to be driven to complete work. And this really, I'm passionate about these topics. And so that helps.
So you mentioned that they were kind of getting the the scraps. They were given just enough food so that they could do their work, but kind of maybe not have enough energy to, rebel, to start a revolution. Do you Can you give me and the audience an idea of like what what were the primary foods that they were fed in this period?
Cornmeal is a big one. And then, so that would be like the sort of base food.
Mm-hmm.
And then little bits of meat. Um, it depended on where, because some people could grow food, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes enslavers thought that was good for themselves, right?
Mm.
Because then, they didn't have to take care of that part of the feeding. And also it gave people a little bit of joy and independence. And, just enslavers thought they would be grateful for that. And
Mm-hmm.
then, again, like thinking, oh, hope people don't turn on me or, try to be free. So, so sometimes there was this supplemental food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, do you know what were the primary kind of health issues that people got
Right.
back then?
Yeah. So I have a kind of list in the book, and it's interesting because these are nutritional diseases and like conditions that we mostly don't see anymore, except for
Yeah.
like in some parts of the world where people have a lot of problems accessing nutritious food. But things like beriberi or it's like not coming to the top of my mind right now. The kind of it's like kwashiorkor and like all
Oh,
these diseases that I
yeah.
had to learn because I didn't know about them, but also like rickets and scurvy and things that we still know you can get if you're deprived of a lot of minerals and vitamins.
Well, kwashiorkor, that's basically, being protein deficient. So
Mm,
that's interesting, which
yeah.
is probably a great sign that they were and were not getting enough calories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then it's also interesting because instead of acknowledging that these were nutrition related diseases, the enslavers basically had their physicians diagnosed to say, oh, this is a biological race
Mm.
difference. You know, this is just a weakness in African people that we white people don't have, which is, a sort of biological racism that is still with us today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's move to the chapter called Americanization through Homemaking,
Okay.
which, to me is it's fascinating how it seemed that the I guess government and food policies were trying to Americanize and even like erase cultural identities. Whether you were Latino or Black or whatever. And so, like, how did the government try and change the food traditions of immigrants and Native people?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I do kind of a case study in there of California and a women's movement to target women and girls who were Mexican um, as the kind of homemakers and the core of the home, and thinking that if they train them to eat like white Americans, then that would transform their households. It would stop, the fathers and husbands from being criminals or not being patriotic, that this was the key. So they ran through all these lessons on what you should eat and when you should eat it, and they would have girls setting tables and this very domestic sort of
Mm-hmm.
well-meaning but very racist training. And the books are just hilarious to read through now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But give me another example
Of how these lessons, like how
about
things.
how basically we were trying to erase some of these, like, cultural uh, indigenous cuisines, like, Mexican,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So on the one hand, just, well, Mexican food, everybody loves it, but it's got a bad name. It's unhealthy, right? So we actually have these foods that are very healthy, and especially in their, indigenous forms. And,
Yeah.
people weren't eating just like bread made of white flour like we eat now, right? Everything that went into bread was highly nutritious, but unrecognizable to ours. And one of the main sort of ingredients or foods is milk and cheese. And so a lot of diets, indigenous diets, Mexican diets, they actually didn't eat the kind of cheese in the quantity that we
Hmm.
have, right? And we have a condition called lactose intolerance, right? Where a lot of people do not digest milk after their children. And yet the United States has given, I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but that's okay. Yeah. But it's a
Yeah,
good.
you're jumping into the unbearable whiteness of milk.
I am, but it's also an answer to this. All the chapters kind of
Yeah.
overlap, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
there's like
Yeah.
a big push to make people eat, drink milk, eat cheese, um, in ways that make them sick in a lot of different ways, but also to Americanize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so speaking of milk, well, actually, I before we go on to milk too much, I want to talk about, like, if when I think of, like, I have traveled to central Mexico and I have visited with the Tarahumara Indians, and they have something, and you talk about it in the book, called the Three Sisters,
Yeah.
right? You have the corn, you have the beans, and you have the squash, and it's a very, very wonderful symbiotic relationship. And this, to me, is some of the most healthy food on the planet.
Yeah.
And like, you go to Taco Bell now, and it's not really the Three Sisters.
No. I don't think any of this. Well, one ground up sister, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so it is crazy how some of these um, healthy indigenous diets have been so just bastardized, um,
Yeah, and all
and
the
yeah,
nutrition sucked out of it. So
yeah,
you have
yeah,
perfect food, and then also this, strange world where people are calling that food unhealthy, right?
hmm,
So we have, like these programs like the WIC program where they're trying to give nutritious food to women and children and infants, right? But then the way they got this program going was kind of people sitting around saying, well, if we don't give them food, they're just going to serve their kids tortillas and beans, right? Like, that's terrible when actually it's incredibly nutritious. Right. So it's these kind of like racist views of what it should be a staple food, but the staple foods are all very unhealthy, as opposed to in cultures where the staple foods are very healthy.
yeah. It's incredible that you bring that up. It reminds me, I for years I would go to Big Bend National Park, cross the Rio Grande River, and then go into the mountains on the Mexican side of Big Bend. And I became friends with a goat herder named Felipe,
Mm-hmm.
and he would let me kind of camp out at his little pueblo. And I'm not exaggerating when I say he had a little stove that was made out of an old drum, and what he would eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner was corn tortillas with basically refried beans that he made himself.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
That is literally it, unless he got some fruit from, some people that drop by. So, you're right. I mean, that, and this guy was in his early 70s and fit as a fiddle and amazing.
You don't even have to be up in the mountains. I actually spent some time living with a family in Veracruz in the mountainous regions.
Yeah.
And it was the same. It was like there's one pot of beans and, you're making fresh tortillas and everybody gathers and that's what everybody eats every day. But I never want anything else. I was like, I actually very happily can eat this. It's completely satisfying,
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah. No, Dan Buettner would be happy to hear that too. All right, let's go back to you brought up the milk and how many people. Well, you didn't actually say how many. Can you give me an idea of the percentages by race of what lactose intolerance people suffer?
Here's a very broad thing. It's basically if you're white, Scandinavian, Northern European, you're pretty solid to digest milk. And if you're anybody else, you're going to have problems, right? Not everybody, but like 80 to 90% of the population. Yeah. So it's highly skewed.
And so do you know, like, when and why did this become such an important crux of the American diet?
Oh, yeah. Milk.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess people have been drinking it for a long time, but they were getting really sick from it, right? So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, people were trying to drink this kind of unpasteurized milk, sending it from rural areas into cities to give to kids. Kids were dying at huge numbers because of this, right? And then milk was also passing on like tuberculosis and hand, foot, and mouth disease. And it was a mess, right? But instead of just saying, okay, we're not doing this, let's pivot in another direction, we got a lot of promotion and propaganda about milk, right? So there's this one guy, E.V. McCollum. He was a nutritional biologist, and he became this huge booster for milk. And Hoover, who was the Secretary of Agriculture, whatever, nutrition at that time, sent him around the country to make speeches about how great milk was. And his selling points were, Aryans drink milk. These are the people of the highest intellect and the arts. And so we should drink it too. Right. There were so many.
Strong science.
There we go. So, they would go to schools. They would have little fairs around milk. They try to make milk fun. At the same time, we have the government trying to support the dairy industry, right? When we get into the 30s and it's very depressed and everything is depressed, that's one of the industries that gets a lot of support from the government, which leads to a lot of extra milk. And so that starts being given into school lunches, into, kind of like food, emergency food, what we would call now, sent overseas, right? So we've always had this supply and demand problem where the government's trying to make sure we have a huge supply supporting the industry, but people don't want it. And so it gets given to groups that can't say no. So, for example, going back to our first chapter, Indigenous people living on reservations, they get boxes from the government called commods because they're these commodity surpluses, right? And they get massive blocks of cheese. And then we see also the government going around to poor Black and brown neighborhoods, giving out huge blocks of cheese. This is because they've converted all this extra milk that they had to buy because consumers didn't buy into cheese to store it, put it all over the United States, filled caves with extra cheese, still couldn't figure out what to do with it, said maybe we should just dump it in the ocean, but then just started giving it to poor people. So we have this unwanted food that's also a symbol of whiteness and Americanness that is being pushed around, given to people who need it, but who get sick from it.
And it is now, my understanding is it's the number one source of saturated fat in the American diet.
That makes sense.
Because it is put on and under and over and through just about everything. It's crazy. It's like how many of these influencers now are pushing milk, they're pushing cheese, they're pushing a lot of foods that, I think the science truly shows we'd be better off without. And I would imagine, these most demographics that have a lactose intolerance. I mean, cheese is basically just it's a concentrated source of milk calories.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like as an example for listeners, like a glass of whole milk is about 150 calories. If you were to take, a little block of cheddar cheese and turn that into 8 ounces, so 8 ounces of milk, 150 calories, 8 ounces of melted cheddar cheese, 960 calories. So it's almost 6.5, 7 times the amount of calories,
You can see
3,
why
4 times.
it's good for people who are hungry. Like, it's not the kind of thing you can turn down because it is like so full of calories, but I mean, not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned too how milk consumption has been going down as of late. Yes.
Oh, I mean, not even just as of late. I would say over like 40 years now. Because I used to say 30, but I think I started saying that about 10 years ago. So yeah, it's been on a very steep and steady decline, especially now. Well, I think people don't feel good when they drink milk, so they don't want it. And now we've developed so many great alternatives that you really don't need it. Even if you crave, whatever it is that is part of milk, you can get the same thing from a different product that's not going to make you sick.
What in your research, what are some of the side effects from lactose intolerant that people experience?
I think, it's not a lot of my research. I mean, lactose intolerance, I think, you'll get sick, you'll feel uncomfortable. It's unpleasant, but there's also a lot of research that is connecting milk consumption to more serious health conditions. And so like studies coming out of Harvard and other really respected places that it's also, contributing to heart disease, cancer incidence, at least higher risk of these things, strokes, that is even more of a problem. Because when we think about lactose intolerance, is like, it's bad. But a lot of people can say, well, I'll choose that, because I can put up with it, or I'll take a lactate or whatever, right? But then when it comes to these other things, I don't think people are making choices because they either don't know or they're, it's just not laid out in that very clear way because the reactions are not immediate. Lactose intolerance is like, I drank it, I felt sick. And then I made a cost benefit analysis, whether I want to do that or not. Right. But other connections to more serious types of health issues, you don't make a choice each time you're consuming. Right. And so to me, that's kind of more insidious.
Yeah. I don't know how old you are, but I am. When I was in the
about 25. Go ahead.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I was born in 63. And so I can remember in the late 60s, early 70s, at lunch, we would always each be given a little carton of milk and never even thought anything of it. Right. Just kind of drank it down thinking that it was good for you. And I just think how egregious that was that they were making us, for the most part, drink milk. Right.
Well,
And then
I
if you
think,
didn't want to,
yeah.
what?
No, I'm gonna
Yeah.
say like it hasn't really changed is what I think is odd because so my kids went to school in Waikiki Elementary,
Yeah.
it's called in Hawaii anyway. And so like there they also gave out the little things of milk and the
Yeah.
kids couldn't even leave the cafeteria if they didn't drink it. I mean, mine are vegan and they didn't. But generally, it's like you could throw all your food in the garbage, but if you didn't
Yeah.
drink your milk, you had to stay in the cafeteria. So think of how many years in between that is. And we still have that. Yeah.
So if yours, so I was going to ask you this, and this is, I think, a great time. What is your personal food philosophy? Are you vegan?
I am. I'm even wearing my
Yeah.
one of my vegan shirts for you here, but you can't
Yeah.
really see it.
Yeah.
So,
How,
yeah.
how long have you been vegan?
Quite a long time. Many,
Right.
many, many years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, little high five, virtual high five.
Uh,
And did your children, did they need a note saying that, they were vegan and
right.
that they didn't have to drink the milk?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, so that is required, but the school wasn't that strict on it because they kind of like from entry, it was known, it was well known, right, that
Got it.
those kids were not going to be drinking the milk, but I think
Yeah.
they were the only ones.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
because I mean, were a lot of the students Hawaiian?
Yeah. All kinds of,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot of mixed,
Okay.
race
I'm just
identification.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if Hawaiians fall into that, that population that do have a kind of a inherent lactose intolerant
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Let's go into the school food failure. And
Well, we're sort
in
of
this
there.
this chapter,
Yeah.
well, yes, but you talk about how the school lunch programs are used as a dumping ground for all these agricultural surpluses. Going back to the Great Depression. So what else besides milk?
Oh, yeah. So basically, corn is one of these foods that gets some subsidies, but then because there's so much of it, it doesn't look like, oh, well, here's a nice ear of corn for you, right? It's actually being
Yeah.
processed into mostly corn syrup, which is what would show up in a school meal, right? Same with soy. Again, it's not like you're going to have like some edamame soybeans or something. No, you're going to have oil, right? It's converted into oil. And so, in meat and milk, what you see is that you get a lot of processed food because that's
Mm-hmm.
the kind of most cost effective way of transforming these surpluses of these subsidized commodities into something for mass consumption.
Mm.
So it's like, here's your tater tots, here's your chicken nuggets, the pizza, all of the kind of junk food.
Yeah. And of course, it's a double whammy because not only is it, feeding insulin resistance and obesity and the beginnings of heart disease and other chronic disease, these kids are also, it's training their palate to really like these hyperpalatized foods.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
why
really,
we've seen a
yeah.
lot of entry of like the fast food industry into schools over the past few decades, right? And they are very hyper aware of that and really trying to get in so that that's going to be your comfort food even when you're an adult, right? That like you said, you're developing a palate. And in addition to what you're saying about, the sort of long-term health consequences, there's also just the daily. So,
Mm-hmm.
We all know, like if we choose, we're going to eat some kind of fast food or highly processed or like deep fried. I'm sure you never do that, but if you did, then, you're just not going to feel good. And so you're like, okay, I'm just not going to feel good for a few hours. I'm okay with that. But when you're a kid in school and that's what you're having for breakfast and that's what you're having for lunch, it's pretty hard to then like sit through the day and be receptive to learning, and it just affects everything, right? So not only your health and nutrition, but even your education, which then of course leads to like opportunities in life, right? So it's pretty significant. And
Yeah.
just you mentioned the title of the chapter about survival pending revolution, and
Yeah.
that was a reference to the Black Panthers breakfast program. So I think this
Wow.
is a good time to bring that up, because they recognize how important that feeding school children is, right? And if they would start the day with nutritious food, and also in community, and there's that cultural element as well, that they were going to have more successful kids, right? Which is a successful community, is a successful world for all of us, right?
Yeah.
And so the programs that we have now that the government sponsors, a lot were inspired by the Black Panthers, except they weren't keeping the kids' well-being in mind. They were keeping in mind the well-being of the agricultural and food industries and their need to get rid of these subsidized commodities and then feed them to kids, kind of killing two birds with one stone, but then maybe a little too much on the killing side.
Hmm. Tell me, why is it just because the milk and the corn and the soy lobbyists are just so intertwined with, the government? I mean, why are we not subsidizing fruits and vegetables and whole grains? Why are we subsidizing, just to put it bluntly, all the crap?
Yeah, great question. So this all kind of had its start back in the 30s, when the selection of which foods to subsidize was somewhat correlated to the needs of the country, which was people were hungry, right? And so,
Mm.
as you've said, like with cheese or other kinds of
Yeah.
these foods, these kind of foods do make you feel full, right? The problem is that once that problem was basically solved, we had new nutritional problems, which was this kind of junk food and all the things that we've mentioned, that would be solved by eating more fruits and vegetables and beans and other things that, whole grains, whatever, that are healthy but are not subsidized. But at that point, because of the extent of subsidies that were given over the first few decades of the program, those industries became so rich, they
Mm.
consolidated, they just took over, and then they became highly influential over policy. So even if at this point the government, out of like interest of the people, wanted to pivot to put more money into those types of crops, the resistance is too strong.
Mm.
So the government kind of lost control over its own food policy and does now cater to the strong lobby movements, to the sort of overlap between these big industries and positions in the administration. And they're so entrenched, it's been impossible to make that change.
Mm. There's I can't remember which country it is. It's either Finland or Norway,
Okay.
where they had one of the highest rates of heart disease in the world, like comparable to the United States, if not a little bit higher. And they basically did an about face, and they started subsidizing fruits and vegetables and berries and things like that. And I'm wondering if you came across this in your research, and literally turned it around overnight, the amount of heart disease, obesity, all these things. And you know, they just got their act together. I mean, Winston Churchill a long time ago said that the greatest asset that any country can have are healthy citizens. And I don't know like what it's going to take for us to start investing in our children, in the school lunch programs, and subsidizing the right foods and everything else that's doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think it takes a different kind of political framework, that
Yeah.
is not so heavily leaning into the capitalist side of, because a lot of other countries and, the ones you mentioned, or Canada, or, just a lot of different countries, they're still capitalist, but they're sort of tempered, they're like democratic socialists, or, they
Yeah.
just have more of the socialist philosophy, which wants to take care of citizens, right? But when you're heavy
Yeah.
capitalist and you're very focused on money making and corporations, then that's built into the idea of the system that you're just going to sacrifice some people, right? And so it's profits over people, and that's what we're living under. And so I think where you can see more of that philosophy that you're longing for is maybe on a state or local level,
Yeah.
where there's
Yeah.
more incentive to like take care of your citizens. It's closer, the government is closer to the people and more invested in like satisfying its constituents, or being successful. So where we might not see changes on the larger federal level anytime soon, we can see them in the sort of just more local,
Yeah. It's interesting to me because I look around and it seems more and more that, um, at least from my very narrow vantage point, that all of America is becoming more and more unhealthy. The amount of obesity, diabetes, everything. And to me, I think this dovetails nicely into your chapter on delicious, and how there's just there's racist food marketing, but I also see it as just marketing in general. The Doritos and the Coke and all the hype, the ultra processed food that people, doesn't matter if you're white, brown, black, green, blue, you as a human being, your palate is drawn to these foods. Doug Lyle, who I've had in the podcast several times, has co-authored a book with Dr. Alan Goldhammer called The Pleasure Trap. And how, you're eating these foods and it just, everything about them feels so right, but they are so wrong as far as, what they're doing to us health wise. But I'm getting off. So explain
okay.
how,
Yeah.
how food marketing is in fact racist.
Well, we have certain ideas in society about who eats what, right? And these are reflected, created, reinforced by marketing, right? So you'll see, if it's going to be a health food, it's going to be yogurt or something, then you're going to see these like white, thin people, right? But if it's going to
Yeah.
be like McDonald's, then you're going to see this very race targeted marketing, right? They have websites that are identity based, they they sponsor community events, right? They really want to have people identify with fast food, but also for everyone to believe that there are certain populations, and this goes back to even what we were talking about, the Mexican immigrants and the attempts to Americanize, right? Part of the um, battles against their food is this idea that it's unhealthy. People are lazy, they're ignorant, they don't understand nutrition, and their food is bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they should change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we see all these images and we internalize them, even when they're lies.
Mm. Mm.
No, I mean, if you think about like the vegan movement, and you see like a lot of white facing thinking about being vegan, right? In fact, like there's a very large percentage of Black population that is vegan, but that's it's just not as a popular an image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it was I heard 5 years ago that the fastest growing population of vegans were, in fact, Black Americans.
Mhm.
So, I mean, bravo. Um, so, do you think that, I mean, how much agency in 2025 do some of these different demographics have?
I think for all of us, we're very circumscribed by, what is around us. We want, of course, we all want to feel agency, right? And this is a really kind of a rallying cry in the United States, especially the freedom, right? And so it's even like freedom in food to choose what you want, even if you want to choose a horrible chemical that's like going to ruin the lining of your internal organs, right? It's like, no, we can't ban those things because we
Right.
must be free. But everybody is constrained by their external circumstances. So, like, how much money do you have? How much time do you have? How close do you live to a place that is going to sell you the food you need? How much is it going to cost? Right? How many jobs are you working? How many people are you caring for? How many people do you have to feed? On what budget? Yeah. So, what can you walk down the street and get versus you need to go to another neighborhood? Do you have a car? What is the bus route? All of that. So all of these things actually define what we eat.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have a lot of privilege, then, maybe we're wandering the aisles of Whole Foods and like checking ingredients, right? And saying, oh, wait, I don't want that, or I do want that. But most people are just, working with a budget, working with time constraints, and working with whatever's closest to make it all work for the number of people they need to feed, even if that is just yourself.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on food deserts?
Well, unfortunate, right? We do have this system of food apartheid in the United States, where there's a concentration of good food in some places and really crappy food in others, and that should change. And I would love to see the USDA use some of its money to just open up, sources of food and in neighborhoods where you can't get it, make it cheap, make it accessible. I think that should be part of the program, and we should get away from the idea that, well, people are just making choices. They're not. They're not just inclined towards unhealthy food, and this whole characterization of certain foods of certain cultures being unhealthy. I think everybody basically wants the same things, and even if it's your pleasure trap foods, you still want it probably in moderation, right? Because our bodies also are telling us, like, when we eat stuff that's really healthy, that feels good.
Your last chapter, what's law got to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of connects all the previous chapters, but emphasizes kind of the manipulation and control of food, and how it's been kind of embedded in American law and policy. And this is not just a historical accident. So I'd love for you to kind of expand on that.
Sure. So an argument that I'm making in that chapter is that these food laws and policies that control, what gets subsidized and who gets to eat what, are actually unconstitutional. So they're not just bad laws and policies. They're like next level, right? And so part of that, I'm thinking about these amendments to the Constitution that came up after, in the Reconstruction period after emancipation, and how, first of all, we're supposed to have equal protection of the law for everybody, right? And so if our food laws and policies favor people because of their race, then that is not allowed under the 14th Amendment, right? And then under the 13th Amendment, which did abolish enslaving people in voluntary servitude, right, also says, the court has said that means any kind of vestiges of slavery, like anything that happened during that period to facilitate enslaving people and has continued in our society since then, violates the 13th Amendment. And that is what we see with food law and policy. The law upheld total control of the food that enslaved people could eat, and then throughout history has enforced different kinds of systems that were the same. So even just saying, well, you can't hunt or fish on certain days where sharecroppers had to work, were off. And so making it impossible, right? And we've just had a system that has never changed in that regard. It's been a through line of history. And so I'm arguing there that the 13th Amendment also means that we can't sustain these food laws and policies that create and perpetuate these racial disparities because they violate the Constitution.
Is anybody else bringing that to the right people's attention?
We'll see. I know that there was a suit from some of the Animal Legal Defense Fund people working on milk in public schools, that they were using some of this scholarship of mine. So, trying to get it to the ears that want to listen and make change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we've talked about, I mean, this is one of the most important things I think that we could focus on as a culture.
Yeah.
Right now.
You.
It's just, I mean, truly.
I think it was really helpful to win a couple of awards with this book.
Yeah. No, I saw you won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Prize winner. What else? Anything else I should know about?
Yeah, the James Beard Award.
Oh my God! Well, that's a little lesser known one.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So, way to be.
Because that really brought it to a new audience, right?
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah.
Golly, I mean, and you got a really nice blurb from Michael Moss, who has appeared at one of my events and wrote Sugar, Fat, and Salt, right? And a couple others. I mean, So, I mean, how perfect. No, you've done really a remarkable job stringing it all together here. And it really is for somebody that wants to know the history of our food in this country and those that I think have been marginalized because of it. This is a must read. Thanks. Absolutely. There she blows right there. Ruin their crops on the ground. What are you having? So it's a couple hours behind there. What are you having for lunch today? Have you figured it out?
Okay, great question. Well, okay, maybe not a great answer, but I've been on this kick of making about once a week. It's a cheesecake. It's a banana chocolate cheesecake.
And that's for lunch. That's lunch.
Well, that's the next thing I'm going to eat today.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And is this a homemade recipe?
It comes out of Isa Chandra Moskowitz's. Yeah, it's in her pie book.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, she's quite the chef. It's funny, when I was first writing my first book, The Entry to Diet, she was a real force. Mm-hmm. This is back in 2000, 2008, 2009.
She's been legendary forever.
Yeah. She's something else. Well, Andrea, where can people go to get the book and learn more about you and everything you're doing?
Okay, great. I mean, the book, if you don't have it in your local bookstore, tell them to order it. Tell them it won a James Beard Award. They like that. Soon that sticker will be on the cover too. But honestly, anywhere books are sold, you can get it. You can listen to it. There's an audiobook too, if you prefer. Yeah. And so I always like to support the independent bookstores, but that's not an option for everybody. So by any way you can. And then you can Google me. My name will come up first on my name, which is pretty amazing because there's a lot of people with that name.
There are.
Yeah. But so I'm a law professor.
Is this your first book, Andrea?
This is my second book.
Second book.
Yes, but the first book came out of some research that I was doing actually for this book on milk. And because it is about breast milk and breastfeeding. And so the first book, which is called Skimmed, tells a story of a group of quadruplets, these sisters. They're called the Folult sisters, and they were born in 1946 in North Carolina. They were the first recorded Black quadruplets to survive childbirth. And they had a white doctor who decided to name them all after his own family members. And then he used these little babies to do experiments with vitamin C. And then he auctioned off the rights to use them in promotional materials to formula companies. So they became the first Black formula models. And so yeah.
Where were the parents during all this?
Well, so the parents, the father was a tenant farmer on a tobacco farm, and the mother, who also had 6 other kids, she could not speak or hear. And so basically this doctor just kind of took over. And then when the girls turned 6, he went to a judge and he had them taken away from their parents. And a nurse that worked for that doctor became their guardian. And so they moved off the farm. I mean, it's an incredible story.
Are they? Do you know if they're still alive?
They're not
today?
still alive, no, because another part of this story. So basically, they became these pet milk formula models, and they were barely paid. They lived in poverty their whole lives. They made a lot of money for pet milk, but they had a kind of supply of this evaporated milk, which is what formula was at the time. Until they were 18, they drank a lot of that. They all got breast cancer, which is highly unusual for multiples, right? And so 3 of them died very early, and then 1 of them survived until a few years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But there's if you read the book, it's got a lot of fascinating history of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the heinous things that we as humans have done to other humans it's very unsettling and disturbing. But I'd like to think that there's many more, compassionate, empathetic, wonderful people out there that are doing good and doing the right thing. So thank you for, exposing and bringing all this to light, Andrea. Wonderful work.
Thank you.
Appreciate you very much.
I appreciate you, the work you do, and for having me come and talk to you and everything you're saying.
Yeah. So can you give me a virtual Plant Strong fist bump on the way out?
Here we go.
Boom. All right. See you, Andrea.
Okay, bye.
Andrea really opened my eyes to how deeply food, history, and inequality are all intertwined. Her work reminds all of us that the fight for food justice, it isn't just about what's on our plates. It's about who has access, who benefits, and how we can all be part of a more equitable system. And as you and I both know, this discussion is far from being settled. Ruin Their Crops on the Ground is available now, and I'll be sure to put a link in today's show notes. I want to thank you all for tuning in to this important conversation, and a huge thanks to Andrea for sharing her knowledge and passion with all of us. Let's remember, Eating well is important, but understanding the systems behind our food is just as crucial. Until next week, thanks so much for listening, and always, always keep it plant strong.